Hello, my name is Kristina Piestova. I'm a participant of the Place of Art project that hosts the section of the conference you are watching now. Place of Art is a research project focused on the history of contemporary art exhibitions in Russia. We explore a wide range of problems, among which one of the most important for us is the problem of curating. And today we are presenting a mini conference exhibition as a means of analysis of contemporality, ethics and politics of exhibitions. This conference analyzes how contemporary art nowadays is implemented through exhibition process. The mini conference is a part of Higher School of Economics conference Theories and Practices of Art and Design, Socio-Cultural, Economical and Political Contexts. Because of the pandemic we are all facing, this selection is held in online format. So during this June, we will upload a series of video presentations with panel participants that will be followed by the round table in the end of the month. I would like to present my co-host, the participant of the Place of Art group, Natalia Smolyanskaya, artist, curator, philosopher, and the head of the seminar Place of Arts based on Higher School of Economics. Hello, Natalia.
Hello.
And today we are pleased to introduce our guest, Sonja Lau, independent curator and cultural producer from Berlin. Sonja will present her report, Curating Contingency, the making of exhibitions that lend themselves to be affected. Sonja, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation. Yeah, as you have mentioned, I've chosen as a title and theme for this talk, Curating Contingency. And when we speak about contingency, I think already I'm alluding to different levels of control and loss of control as a curator. And also I would like maybe to just read out some lines from the abstract, because I think it's quite, could be quite a good introduction. So with my lecture, Curating Contingency, I would like to shed light on a curatorial frame of mind in which contingency does not disrupt the integrity of an exhibition proposal, but is on the contrary implemented within its realms as a crucial component and significant amplification. What can exhibitions say about themselves once the curators have run out of words? How can we make exhibitions speak as curators beyond the initial proposal? And as I hope to show towards the end, it's definitely not a matter of chance to make this happen. So contingency has, of course, a different nuance to it. Another thing which I didn't write in the abstract introduction was that I think my talk has a lot to do with this term of curatorial knowledge, which is circulating so much through the discourses of our times. And I love that term a lot and I use it a lot, although I, of course, don't know exactly what it means and what curatorial knowledge actually is in contrast and comparison to other forms of knowledge. But I hope that this curating contingency could be one way of grasping it, or one proposal, what knowledge exhibitions can produce in collaboration with contingency. So I will, to illustrate my point, I have chosen two exhibitions. One of mine, which dates far back, and a very recent one by Adam Šimčik and Natasha Ilich. They happen to be at the same place. I don't know if that's also contingency, but with a distance of 12 years. But let's start with one example, then the first exhibition, then I will go to the second one, and then I will try to elaborate a little bit on their relationship. Now comes the shared screen. Hold on. 1 second, I'm very sorry. So, thanks for bearing with me. Okay. gonna, so, okay. Yeah, this is the first example I would like to present briefly as a structure, as a curatorial method. It's an exhibition from 2008 called Repaintings, and which took place at the National Gallery of Tirana. And the genesis of this exhibition was also to me a little bit unexpected. I was also in a way a bit lucky because I because my stay in Tirana happened to coincide with a very large renovation work at the museum. So the museum would literally empty out all the collection of the building and repaint the building. So it was an absolute stunning moment of an empty institution, first of all. But the second particularity about it was, of course, the socialist realism collection that was until then presented on red walls. There was the red room of the socialist realism collection. And so the room was designated to be painted in white. And of course, it was already a very interesting situation, the empty gallery and the shift from red to white to work with. But I think the major point was that being obviously a very recent history, it was a stunning moment of historicization en situ, so to say. You could see how, or you could, it became tangible that once the works would come back into the gallery, onto the white walls, there wouldn't be the same works anymore. There would be in a completely different context and with different narrative. Because obviously the whole whitening of the space was imbued with intentions of contemporaneity and history and putting a larger distance towards the past and so on, which was striking because obviously the painters or the authors of those works were obviously, most of them at least, still living and still practicing. So they would see another shift in their reception during their lifetime, and basically a shift that almost goes from black to white, we could also say. So we tried to, it was a collaborative project with a colleague of mine, Andre Zigers, and what we tried was to somehow render this moment of change that would normally go unnoticed. It would just happen, and I mean, it happens all the time in all museums, but we don't really take notice of it. To render this really visible, also what it means to the social and political and biographical bodies involved, and also to trying to figure a method how to even preserve that moment somehow as an important, I don't know, a perspective on a paradigm shift or something where really history is shaping. So we were not judging the way history is shaping, but we wanted to render it visible, how it happens in front of our own eyes. So what we did was we invited, once the gallery was completely empty, which you can see here on the pictures, we invited some of the painters who were part of the socialist realist collection back into the gallery to work directly on the walls, because the walls were obviously under threat because they would be whitened, but at the same time it was just like an additional layer. It was something that once we would put it there, or they would put it there, it would not really ever disappear. And even the way it would disappear under the white coat would have a significance maybe. So we had this, let's say, I have very few pictures I see. So it was a bit of a, it was a bit of a theatrical setup. We were, because you could enter the gallery at all times while they were working. And there were incredible, it was a huge variety of readings. I mean, from a very cruel reading of exposing the artists, almost like artworks, but there was also a moment of autonomy because the institution was not existing. The old institution had left and the new institution was only coming. So we were trying to work in a void that was somehow autonomous. Also, maybe the gaze of the audience was not so innocent as we think. So whereas you would say that the state was controlling a lot of the artworks beforehand, now in this age of democracy, it wasn't less of a risk to be exposed to the public. I don't know, there was another surveillance system, which was maybe not the state, but then the democratic viewer, or I'm just alluding to a few reactions or thoughts that came in. Obviously, and relating to curating contingency, the moment we invited the painters, we were not, we could not really control the story anymore. And also because we couldn't really foresee what it would mean. It's only something, what it will mean in the end, you can only, it could only develop in the situation and on behalf of every individual position. Of course, the painters chose extremely different works. We asked them to make a, so to say, a copy or a reproduction or a repainting of one of their former paintings in the way they wish, and they chose extremely different versions, ranging from exactly the same work as a gesture of non-guilt and of conviction, and also of free art somehow, up to kind of coded things, and even, and that you can see on the right-hand side, even a very interesting ironic commentary on our curatorial practice, which you see one painter has painted this a man on a red chair, and he, for example, he didn't want to sign his painting once he was finished, which was extremely interesting because he said, I'm okay to participate in your project, but I will not put my signature. And he also wanted to paint in gold, and he was a bit, he was, and that was an interesting dialogue between artist and curator, an unusual one, because it wasn't a typical form of collaboration, but he was signaling to us the irony of our proposal, and he was signaling to us a sort of Western expectation of, I will make this very, very fesh for them, very golden and very glitter-like. And when he didn't want to sign it, we understood he really is not painting, he's painting a message towards us and this whole setting. And then we asked him to show him that we understand that we have a dialogue. We asked him if we could put his signature as a neon sign, like and that you can see on the right-hand side glowing in the background. It's just a light, but it's quite a huge sign, a neon that has his signature. And he was completely okay that he will not sign it, but the neon signature is fine. So we were also talking, in this particular case, we were talking about the ironies of the Western horizon of white cube aesthetics, but also of a very, very polemic perspective on art from East and West, and evil and good and so on. And I think that also came up in the room. On the left-hand side, it was the complete opposite, more like an extremely tragic painter who also didn't paint really, I think, a painting, but he painted he painted his grief, I would say. He took a copy from a painting that was destroyed in the 90s and which he had to repair himself. So basically destroyed by the people who hated his art all of a sudden in 1990. And his career never established in a positive way ever again. And I think that he used that opportunity to work in this autonomous National Gallery as a gesture of grief, but also as a gesture of taking the space back. Or, I mean, you had to be in the space and discuss with the painters to see all that. On the right-hand side, you see already basically the end of the exhibition, when they started to widen the space. Of course, they started to widen out the paintings. So this gives this kind of beautiful sad white squares on the walls. Yeah, here you can see the signature better. And this is just an historic photograph from the traditional pre-1990 time of the gallery, same room. And this is the gallery, not today, this is the gallery 2010. Today it looks once again very different, but this is the result. This is the big, this is what we would only see. And I think the picture doesn't really show it, but if you go in the space, I think it's somehow tangible that there's something covered under, or it looks so clean and so perfect, the space. But I think this code that was inserted there and that was destroyed, not by violence or something, but by a structural change. I think that's visible, and also what was very important was to underline against that white, of course, is not an innocent color. I mean, any whitening is problematic and complex gesture, and it's never an innocent or easy gesture. That is the first project I wanted to show you, and the second, as I mentioned, is by Adam Šimčik and Natasha Ilич, and it happens basically in the same space just last year. And sorry, not this year. And that was called Tirana Patience. And I became aware of this exhibition. Obviously, it was because it took again the socialist realism collection as a starting point. Let me see from the beginning. So it was an invitation by two curators, Šimčik and Illich, to Tirana to work with the space, and they also were interested in the collection. And I think the title "Patience" is, I don't know if I have to explain anything regarding patience, because patience is such an omnipresent term, I think, in particular in Southeastern or Eastern Europe, it's almost a dilemma, it's almost a trauma. It has been a constant preaching of patience, patience, patience. Like waiting is a daily life experience somehow, waiting for different things, waiting for the economy to grow, waiting for this regime to change, for promises and so on. It's also, of course, something that can save you if you know how to be patient. But it's, I think that this term in itself is so strong and so full of meaning on various levels. And also I think they were not 100% so to say strict about what they wanted to do. They didn't want to make an exhibition that stands there and where they already know the outcome. So they knew they wanted to talk about patience, and they knew they wanted to work with the collection. And but they first of all decided to withdraw from the method of exhibiting, and they chose to cover quite a decent part of the collection under this kind of semi-transparent codes. And I think the general idea was from the beginning that this can be, on the long run, be developed. It can be used by other artists. It can be changed. It was offering some sort of thing to work with in no matter what direction in the future. It was more like a suggestion of a question mark. What should we do? And I think that's and kind of protecting a little bit and not being too quick in decision making and in knowing and so on. So I think that worked really beautiful. but even the artists, because they invited a number of contemporary artists, you see David Malikovic, if I pronounce it right, who also kind of protected some of the socialist realist sculptures in these boxes. So everything was very withdrawn, but it's incredible that it was due to open last November 27. Everything was installed, but here you see again another textile. But on the night before the opening, there was this large earthquake, I think, which was in the news in Europe in the least. And the earthquake also hit the gallery, and the gallery was could not open, of course, because of the destruction and because of the state of exception of the whole country, or at least a part of Tirana and Durrës. So all of a sudden, an exhibition that dealt with patience was asking even more patience on behalf of everybody. And whereas in the beginning, Tirana Patience was speaking inside the gallery about, by means of artworks, about certain political dilemmas, all of a sudden Tirana Patience spoke towards the whole outer environment by being related and amplified by the earthquake, because of course an earthquake is in a country with economic problems, it is a disaster with it's a chain reaction of disasters, of course, but if it comes to poverty and reconstruction and so on. And it was just a big, huge burden that there was all of a sudden this, that patience was not just a title and not just a curator's idea like this, but it was proven. It was really a question of, it's a fundamental thing of being in and living in Albania as a citizen, this patience thing. But of course, I found it important that, and I think that's what I also, what I found also very sensitive of the curators, that the fact that the exhibition didn't open or couldn't open, at least for some time, it was not, of course, conceived as a failure or as or like, oh my God, we have to open, or now our exhibition. It was really clear that how can I say, that these worlds have to speak with each other, and they do now. I mean, this is, and it's not a point of romanticizing a disaster like an earthquake, but it's just a reminder that at the end of the day, the exhibition is always is talking about the outside, and the more the better. And it's also kind of a bit like de-anthropomorphing the whole art context by kind of offering artworks protection from human gaze and just really leaving them alone. And it felt like as if the artworks had a secret communication while everybody was debating outside. So this is just two shots from how it looked once it could eventually open. And of course, it doesn't stop here. We know that that's also some, for example, one thing that one work of the exhibition was a huge cover by Ibrahim Mohamed. And with the earthquake, it became the only visible artwork, of course. It was the only thing you could see, that thing from the outside. And it's just very beautiful to see how artworks can change meaning, how artworks can just change within the context, and how strong that is. I mean, it became, of course, some sort of protection veil, first of all, but later it became almost a terror also for the gallery, because the rain soaked in and almost the whole facade started to crumble away. So all of a sudden, the global artist from the global south was extremely present in the city of Tirana, and also putting the whole building into a dynamic that was beyond intentions. but which says a lot about facades, and facades which are working and facades which are not working. As we know, Corona came, second closure of the gallery, and now this is not such a good picture, but from time to time there have been some, for different reasons, political demonstrations, student demonstrations, and since the gallery is very central, it's from time to time locked or behind some SUVs once again. So it's running, so Tirana Patience is running through a series of states of exceptions. And for me as a curator, and therefore I call that curating contingency, I don't think it is chance that things begin to speak about things, or museums or exhibitions start to develop a very loud language, a language that you and also messages that you didn't have even in your mind before, because of course it has to do with trying to seed structures, trying to touch little dynamics within a space that maybe can unfold a life on their own. And I think once they do that, I must admit that the Tirana Patience is a very cruel example, also because of the earthquake. Of course, there's I'm not saying we need earthquakes to make good exhibitions, but I think that from the beginning, working with that long-term thinking, working with an exhibition model that wanted to be affected, that wanted to learn something from the context. It's not a surprise that so much happened throughout those three phases. It wouldn't happen to every exhibition per se. And also I think the repaintings, which also, by the way, of course, maybe can be seen again in the cracks of the walls. I don't know, maybe it cracked up again under the white. I haven't checked, unfortunately. I couldn't because of Corona. These are, from the beginning, curatorial approaches where the curatorial act is considered per se fruitful, but also limited. So you cannot, it is not interesting enough to reproduce what you want to do inside the space. It can be beautiful, it can be, it's sometimes even important to do so in certain artistic collaborations. But if we talk about curatorial knowledge, what is that different from other knowledge? Then I think it's a knowledge that comes from a situation where different gestures, and not only people, but also narratives, power structures, institutional structures, somehow are put into a set of relations, and they start to do something with each other. They don't live in harmony with each other, but they touch each other. And I think when they touch each other, we could speak of a moment of curatorial knowledge, because it keeps sending messages, I would say. Or that's what I, as a curator, am most interested in. What can exhibition, what does a project say later? What does it say after you have run out of words, as I started my talk? I think I would finish here, if you are okay with that. I don't know the time, if I was too short or...
No, thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. I think we have some questions for you concerning the presentation that you were saying. At first, I wanted to ask about the project that you talked the last. It was Tirana Patience, because I didn't really get whether the exposition was changed a little bit or like adjusted to the facts that there was an earthquake, or it was preserved in the way it was mounted before, and the curators just added some kind of extra senses proposal that they were saying?
Yeah, as far as I know, and that's it wasn't changed. What was changed for the worse and the better, I think, is that there was they had a lot of events in the planning, and also panel like forums, discussions, and so on. And and that was all postponed or never happened, but mostly also because of Corona. But also beforehand, nothing was sure if ever it would be possible. But it reminds me more, but I think even that the ambition to make a comprehensive program, side program or educational program, that this didn't happen, is amplifying even the term of patience. I mean, you can come with good intentions to work on an educational level and on a discursive level, and to also invite a lot of intellectuals from the region and beyond to discuss everything which is inside the exhibition. But you can also just contemplate the absence of this happening. I mean, it's a reality that things also don't happen either. In this case, it's climate related or virus related, but it's also most of the time politically related and funding related. So it reminds me a little bit of this one exhibition that took place years ago in Ljubljana, where the gallery was had a strong funding funds, and they decided to stage the same exhibition over and over again, so they wouldn't have any costs. And they called the repetition 1, 2, 3, and so the repetition became political, so to say. And for me, in Tirana Patience, something similar happens. Nothing happens, but the patience becomes political, and even the non-interfering and this not knowing becomes political. It's a matter of looking closer, of not, yeah. So that would be, so they didn't change. It would have been, but it would, either way, it could have been changed. I mean, nobody changed it, but I think it was open for the artists to change it. But for various reasons, it's, yeah, factually, I think it's presented the very same way.
But how do you think, if we are speaking about different projects, for example, not about Tirana Patience and not about repaintings that you were talking before, is it possible sometimes to draw this line between curating ethically and and being sensitive to the topic that you are speaking about, and between like unintended trying to attract more people to the project that you are doing? Is it possible to draw this line between these two like aspects, or sometimes it can be combined in a way?
I mean, it must be possible, otherwise it's useless. But because then it's not working. So, and it's not. I'm trying to talk about more about an openness towards a context than about sneaking for finding exciting things that just happen. Therefore, I try to say this is not chance, or we're talking, it's not accidents. These things are no accidents. They are, and that's what I mean, they lend themselves to be affected. It's just the question, is the curator ready to work with feedback from the outside, or is it a question of hermetics and you stick with your proposal? So of course it's an ethical decision, but so it's it must be possible, but of course it's not something you can do by a set of rules and then it works. And it's also something that it's also something that I don't consider a curatorial style or something, because it cannot be a style. It's not like I do this and you do more historical things and I do curating contingency, but it's just a very beautiful moment when it happens. And when it happens, It doesn't happen by chance, because it happens because you're aware all the time of what happens in your entourage, and you value also. You value it as the artworks you show. So you don't have the hierarchy between artist artwork first, and then viewer, and then maybe other things that come in. So I like it that the hierarchies, there are always hierarchies, but they can shift. There are some, but yeah, but it's not a recipe. It's just very, very beautiful if a situation like that can unfold. Of course, for example, the Picasso for Palestine, the famous Picasso for Palestine, I would also, well, I mean, a lot of artists practice in that way. I mean, curators not really, but a lot of artists practice in that way. So it's actually not absolutely, it's not unknown. It's just unknown as a curatorial thinking. It's not very often applied. But the Picasso of Palestine, of course, it was an idea, a proposal, and whatever happened then on the whole way until the museum in Palestine was, of course, not in the control of the curator. But whatever happened was an important part of the project. If it would have gotten there, if it wouldn't have gotten there, it didn't. Every step was automatically of relevance. And I hope that that I will try in my curatory practice to keep as curatorial thinking that makes me discover relevances, like throughout the working process, things that are beyond that are not obvious and that are maybe very small and banal, but that carry relevances. That's my.
Natalia, do you have questions?
Yes, thank you, Sonia. So I would like to pose one question. Would you say that the approach you describe is connected to the modern concept of sustainability? Are ethics and politics in exhibition projects firmly bound with each other? Or perhaps the disposition to work with chance is a certain curatorial strategy?
It is, the sustainability is an interesting and difficult question. I haven't asked myself that yet, I must admit, so I have to answer completely spontaneously. At first glance, I think spontaneously, I would say it has it probably doesn't have a sustainability within the arts or something, or for the institution, or for that space. I think if there's a sustainability, it's this politicization of a society in general, and that can have a long-term unfolding effect. On the other hand, it is a completely, this approach is not interested in production, and that's in new production, it's not important. There can be a lot of new production, or there can be none. It's like with the Ljubljana repetition exhibition. So, which in itself I think can be sustainable, which is a aspect of sustainability. A step away from overproduction and from putting one exhibition over the next, and always ignoring the one that was before. So if it was a clear yes and no between sustainability, I would say yes, but it's not, but it should be maybe looked at more carefully to really put that at work. I have not, to be honest, it's not, it had not, I have not considered the aspect of sustainability in that aspect so much, even though it's so important. So basically, I cannot really say. It has, I think it has still to be developed and thought through, the sustainability aspect. yeah, that would be my answer.
Okay. We have another 2 questions, so maybe I will start. So the concept of contingency refers us to the aleatorics, which is so popular now in contemporary music. It is when the composer doesn't write all the notes with their durations in full, but gives directions, creates a certain basic drawing. And I wonder if it's possible to compare this curatorial approach you're speaking about with this type of musical notion.
I would say no, not really, because also, let's not forget, Curating Contingency is a title of what that I chose. It's again it's not a pamphlet, something. There could be I think the subtitle, Exhibitions that lend themselves to be affected, is more closer to what I'm trying to say. I mean, of course, every curator needs to know and work as they want to do, and maybe there is a relation, but for me, to the music example that you mentioned, for me, not so much, because for me, it's not so much about improvisation or about trying to not think or trying to be a different form of being when producing, or it's to me, it's more like you have to start with a very, very clear and idea and position, and be even radical in that. But once you start working, it's different. So once you start really working on it, the whole thing can change and takes in things that were never planned. But there is, of course, a very clear plan in the beginning. There's a conviction in the beginning that, like with the repaintings, that for me it was clear this has to be done, and we have to find we have to put a code, or we have to put a layer. We have to work with layerings, and that was 100% clear, and that also didn't change. But how and when? So I think it's not a gradual like with the music example that you mentioned. I think it's more gradual loss of control. Sometimes it's like a nuance, and I think this is more like strong plans hitting each other. Everybody has a strong plan. The institution has a strong plan, the artist, and it's more like stitching them together and then looking what happens, then being from the beginning already loose. I think so. Therefore, I don't connect too much to that musical approach with what I try to illustrate.
Thank you. In your opinion, do those unexpected circumstances change the role of viewer on exhibitions? Can we say that viewers start to have a much active role then?
Yeah, that is definitely true, because it's the viewer has an active role. The viewer can be lucky. Sometimes the viewer doesn't even have to look at anything. He can even be home. For example, Picasso for Palestine is for me an exhibition that I have the impression I've seen it 100 times. But of course I wasn't with the artwork. Nobody was with the artwork. We only know the documentation. But I think, of course, the viewer is very, very, and therefore I liked the previous talk that you featured in this Places of Art with the Latvian Pavilion. The spectatorship is predominant, and I think it's already changing. In my experience, the viewers do look at a lot of things inside a museum space. They don't only look at artworks. I think that the general awareness is much higher. They don't only read museum labels, they read them critically very often. They look at gaps. But this is this curatorial approach is very much relies on viewers' reaction and is shaped by them. But yeah, it's defined by them. It's defined by the texts that are and the thoughts that come from the people who experience the scenario. Yeah. Yeah, and the most important critiques, of course, therein comes from the spectator. But yeah, I don't know if I answered that elaborate enough. Yeah, but yeah, it's yeah.
Thank you.
It's important.
Thank you very much for your answers and for the presentation itself. I think it was amazing. So really eager on our viewers to watch it. So I think we are already done with our report for today, and we hope to see you on the round table at the end of the month.
I'm very looking forward. I liked the two presentations a lot, and I think it's a super interesting combination. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and yes, see you soon.
Yeah, see you very soon. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much.